you're about to see, we're taking primarily on First Street, between First Avenue and Avenue A, and my personal history goes all over this area. Right now, these pictures are hanging, the pictures, 15 pictures from this selection are hanging right now at the Metropolitan Playhouse. They've been up since September, and they're going to come down soon to make way for another body of work that I'm going to have there beginning around April 15th. I'm working on those prints right now. I printed half the show today, in fact. The building where those pictures are, I attended catechism in 1957. It was part of Most Holy Redeemer. And now the Metropolitan Playhouse is in there, and a bunch of other playhouses and other organizations. All right, so let's go right into the introduction. The Lower East Side in the 1960s was a neighborhood of stark contrasts, a place that could easily be romanticized or quickly become mean streets. It was teeming with families and kids, a mix of Italians, Jews, Ukrainian, Poles, and Puerto Ricans, primarily working class, all living together in an uneasy alliance. It also had a few people who had migrated up from the south and a sprinkling of educated people. Growing up, I witnessed a lot of violence. My mother and I were walking along the street when a man suddenly hit the sidewalk in front of us. We found out later that he had been thrown off a roof by the local mob. I also remember a commotion taking place across the hall from our apartment. It sounded like two people arguing in a drunken brawl. Next evening, the police were knocking on our door, asking my parents questions. It turned out to be a woman had stabbed a man, killed him, and dragged his body to the basement. Someone found the body, reported to police. The woman was then arrested for murder. The neighborhood had many community centers known as settlement houses. I went to the Christodora House, the Education Alliance, and the Boys Brotherhood Republic. It had a dark room where I got my first lesson in photography in 1959. After school, all the kids on the block would gather at the Christodora House gymnasium to play dodgeball. I loved it. I got hit so many times in the face, it seemed as though I broke my eyeglasses once a week. During the hot, sticky summer months in the settlement houses would send us off to summer camp where we slept in tents, staring at kids from all over the city. We played lots of games that were passed down from kid to kid. Our yearly calendar was made up of seasons. Summer meant scooter season. We took the wheels off our roller skates, got a 2x4 piece of wood, a wooden milk crate, 10 cents worth of nails from the hardware store, hammered it all together and presto a scooter. We raced up and down the street, banging into each other like bumper cars, which could end up wrecking our scooters. I had the bright idea of armoring my scooter with plywood, but it made it so front heavy that when I hit a pothole, I went flying head over heels. Weeks before the 4th of July, illegal fireworks were being sold all over the Lower East Side. Firecrackers sold at 10 cents a pack. More powerful ash cans and cherry bombs had the explosive power of a quarter stick of dynamite. Every night I went to the roof to see skyrockets and Roman candles and hear explosions from every corner of the neighborhood. The fall season brought a game called Skelzy that required no bottle caps. The object of the game was to advance around 13 squares. We had drawn on the sidewalk with chalk. The first to complete all 13 squares was crowned the killer, who could knock his opponents out of the game. Other games we played all year round, hide and seek, and a form of tag called Ringalivio, which we played on the building's roof until old lady Topaniki chased us off, wielding a broom and shouting, "Bums, go where you live!" Off the tip, a variety of stoop ball involved throwing a ball at a corner of our building. There were always disagreements about whether the ball was inbounds or not. We seemed to argue more than we played. If an argument would not be reached, we would call for a do-over. Childhood ended in the late 1960s when some of my friends got hooked on heroin. One was DOA at the hospital but survived. Another was not so lucky. He overdosed and died. Several of us were drafted during the Vietnam War, while others enlisted as a way out of the neighborhood. Blocks were being torn down for urban renewal and future gentrification. The world I grew up in had disappeared.
John, 1 second, I have some people you can trust.
Sure.
Okay.
You don't have to duck. Duck and cover.
What's their seats over there? All right, John, go ahead. Thanks.
This is an image of Steve Benevento, one of my oldest, dearest friends. This is circa 1965. I just spoke to him on the phone yesterday. He lives in El Sobrante, California, suburb of San Francisco. He's standing on the roof of the building he lived in at 80 East First Street. I have a lot of history with 80 East First Street because my dad had a barber shop there that he purchased from a man he worked for starting in the 1940s when he was quite young. He purchased a barber shop and had it until 1960. 80 East First Street no longer exists. It was raised to make way for an old age home in around 1968. So most of the block on First Street was gutted. This is First Street between First Avenue and Avenue A. If anybody has any questions, feel free to don't ask questions while we're going. This is on the roof of the Three Sister Building. This is right over here. This is the building. This is the roof of 80 East First Street. The Crisadora House, we're going to see that later, is down below here. It's now this tall building. And the building I'm standing on, where this pigeon coop is, were three adjoining buildings. It was, I believe, 86, 88, and 90 East First Street. All have been raised. This is the Sunshine Theater now right here. And we're looking at Houston Street running up and down this way. Yana Schimmel's Finishes is right about there as well. And this is the Forsyth Street Park. This is the Three Sister Buildings that we sometimes hung out on top. We hung out either here on hot summer nights to cool off. We played Ring Olivio here. And we either were here on the street level or in the backyard. So there's three different levels that we hung out in. My mother lives in these buildings here. There's the adjoining building down this way. And she moved in there in 1964, and she's still living there. She's 90 years old. This is Peter Ophenius. He's about 14 or 15 here. We used to hang out in the hallways on cold days. And he's smoking away. This is on Pitt Street. This woman, I think, was either drunk or whatever. She fell over, and the fire department came and rescued her. I held the camera like over my head and took this picture. Now, at this time, I had no training in photography. My involvement with photography was primarily with reading Popular Photography, which was a graphics magazine, and it didn't have very much to do with aesthetics, but had a principle of like what a piece of equipment using the jazz and theater. This is Danny Stabile. This is on the far end of First Street.
That's some dude.
My cousin John owned this car that looked just like this, so when he saw this picture, he remembered owning this car. He said the car, he was constantly working on it in the 60s. He bought it, and he was always fixing it. So it gave me bad memories.
What are you shooting with at this time?
Right here, I'm probably shooting with a Kodak Pony camera. It was a very simple camera. Then I couldn't afford a Nikon F, so what I did was I got a Contax 2A, which I got the best technology in the 50s. And Camera Barn was selling a brand new sonar lens for $30 back then, which I used on the camera. So the pictures got a lot sharper as I went along. I mean, this isn't bad, but it also isn't a great camera. This is on the corner of Pitt Street and Rivington. This is 1969. This is Ridge Street. This is the Williamsburg Bridge back here. This school's been renovated into co-ops. This is circa 1969. Now at this point, the conductors, oops, why did it do that? Okay. At this point, the conductors would bang on these buttons to tell the motorman up front when it was clear to close the doors. So they used to signal them by pouncing on that, banging on these. This is 1969. This is the Lancey Street. They don't do that anymore. This is 80 Spur Street. My dad's barber shop was over here. On this side of the street, there was a Chinese hand laundry. A man by the name of Lum Lee had it, and his grandchildren had come from Kowloon, China, and I met his grandchildren in 1957, and I became best friends with his eldest grandson, Leonard, who passed away of a stroke about 2 years ago now. unfortunately. But he was we used to play hooky together, take pictures from junior high school, play hooky. He became a master technician in photography. He could print color, he could print platinum prints, he could do anything in a darkroom, and then he moved on and became a master with computers when they came along. This is a Ford Ventura car. It's from 1955. I looked it up, and I could read the name on here. There's a guy selling one of these that in mint condition in Texas. You could buy one for $2,000 if you want it. That car was 10 years old at that point when this picture was taken, because this is 1965. This liquor store now is a Vietnamese restaurant. And Abe and I ate in there not long ago. It was a liquor store back then. This building was raised. However, when I have this picture in one of my books, I went down the block and I found a duplicate building that's still intact down the street. My Uncle Charlie lived in this building, my friend Steve Benevento lived in this building, the Benascos lived in this building, and there's so many people and I have so much history with that building. And I wanted to go into the building down the street that still exists, but the door was locked. I wanted to see what memories would come up if I walked in the hallway. This was identical. And when I could see the space of what like my father's barber shop was, which used to be here. This is 65, he left in 60. It became a Hispanic barber shop. And the space looks to me now as an adult a lot smaller than I remember as a little boy. This is Russ Benevento, a good friend of my dad's. This is Steve's father. This is on the corner of 3rd Street and Avenue A. Most Holy Redeemer's back over here. Let me see if we can get this. Right here, it's Most Holy Redeemer. This box still exists. It's still standing there, but the front's been taken out. The 2 modern buttons have been put in. It's all right.
So, yep.
You know,
Thank you, John.
What was the address for that again?
This is on the corner of 3rd Street's running this way, and the Avenue A is running that way, crosswise. And that's Steve Benevento's father. It's Russ Benevento. He was a barber. He passed away in 1996. This is Madeline Lean. This is in his 3rd Street schoolyard. This is when schoolyards were open, so kids could go in there all different hours. When we played on the streets, we just like went out in the morning and we played all day. Nobody stole kids back then, so there wasn't always overprotection. And you'll see some of the pictures of my friends. You're going to see no one's overweight. I mean, everybody's out running around. Nobody's sitting at home as they do now, playing on computers or doing anything like that. We were always out. This is Merrill, who was running this shop on 2nd Avenue between 5th and 6th Street selling records. It was 1969. Car accident. This is around 1964. Steve Benevento and Danny, the guy you saw at the do earlier on, would run like jackrabbits every time there was a crash. They'd run to see the accident, to be the first day of all the kids to see what happened, to ask the cops, to find out, and then report to everybody else. They were the absolute first to do that. At this period of time, too, there were a lot of storefronts where there were gypsies. I just remember this the other day. There were fortune tellers, there were dubious people. They would try to find out about your bank account, and if you weren't careful, they would empty it, you know, if they could. And the word gypsy, I believe, it's a bastardization of the Egyptian. But these people were Romanians that were coming and living on the Lower East Side. And you can see that the metal is much heavier in the cars and trucks back then. So when they had an accident, it really slammed into it, ripped it apart. Today the metal is a lot thinner and folds easier, so there's less impact on the person in the car. That's Steve Benevento. This was taken on, I dated this negative, so I know what we did that day, back in 1965. We had come back from the zoo, we went to Central Park Zoo. I could see by the negatives what we did, and then I could see the date, it was like November 19th, 1965, like on a Saturday. This was in his apartment at 80 East 1st Street. That's Roberta. She's carrying on to the camera because I photographed her too much. She's not in danger. And this is right on the corner of the Lower East Side because the Lower East Side extends to 14th Street. From a book I read, it said it went down as far south as, what's the name of that street where they found clams and stuff. I forget the name of the street, over in the south of the Lower East Side. can't remember the name, but it goes as far west as Third and Fourth Avenue in some locations. And at one period of time, well over 100 years ago, there was a greater population density on the Lower East Side than there was in any place in India or China, in the tenements. Fifth Street Schoolyard, my cousin Robert and his friends playing. Every single block had a different constellation of teenagers, young kids, older kids, all different age groups. Everywhere you went, there was guys, girls, all over the place. It was just endless. In any direction we went, there was just different constellations of people. That's our cousin Robert dribbling. He was great at sports. Tried out for the Yankees, almost made it, but then not quite. It was too short. That's me photographing Gerard, and I'm using a Leica M3 now. This is 1966. It stepped up from a Contax 2A to a Leica M3 with a Canon lens, so you can see the quality is a lot sharper. And I'm using Plus X film, which is a lot higher resolution than Tri-X. I like that better. I never printed these negatives until about 2012, and I had a show at the public library. It went over very well. And blogs all over the place picked up on these pictures and sent them around the world. She made an entrance into this party that Madeline Ween had when her parents were out. It was a New Year's Eve party, 1965, becoming 1966, and she came all dolled up with her, you know, like a movie star. I don't know who she was. I ran up to her like a paparazzi and snapped. People were cheering her. With a mean coat and a cigarette, very debonair. This is my cousin Donna's girlfriend, Sandy. Wearing the best of 1960s wardrobe. That's just stepped off the fashion page. This is on the way home. There was a gas station. This is on Houston Street and Ridge. This is a high-rise building there. One of the complaints people had about the Lower East Side currently was that there was no place to buy gas anymore. When I was a kid, my dad would call up in like a dozen different places from the Bowery all over the place to buy gas. And the world changed. This is on Remington Street. Back there. This is Bruce. I never met this guy up coming out of the party on 2nd Street, and he had this dog with him, and I took his picture. This was taken with that sonar lens wide open from the 50s. It just went soft in the background, just beautifully went out of focus with it. Yeah, right open. It did a really nice thing. Russ Benevento smoking. Russ's daughter's, whose store is like right over here behind this truck. This is from on the staircase of 80 East 1st Street. And this is 1968. When I got out of the Air Force. Mario Montieri in Cat's Delicatessen. It's one of the few pictures taken with a 2.25 camera. Looks like a scene out of a movie. There's a guy walking down the street, snapped his picture. It was on 3rd Street. Vito Phineas in a bar called Whitey's Bar. It was a really rough and tumble place. Sometimes people would drink and you'd find blood on the street. The derelicts would get into fistfights with each other. This is 1968, and this was at a period when the first astronauts were going up. I think they went to the moon and came back, but they didn't step on the moon. Not until July of 1969, if memory serves me right. So it was one of the early Apollo flights at this period of time was taking place. I showed this to a waitress a year ago because it's a very, very high-end bar now. And she flipped. They said, this is this bar, 1960. I think this was 68 I took this. Gerard and Evelyn. This is at the same New Year's Eve party where the lady made the entrance. And here they are a year later on Clinton Street. They couldn't afford to live on Clinton Street any longer. If they were to choose a place to live with that on his salary in those days, there's no way he could live on Clinton Street any longer. Back then, of course he did. Fire hydrant. You notice the Carl things. Schoolyard on 3rd Street. I was on the roof of Steve's parents moved from 1st Street to the Fiorello LaGuardia. There were projects, I guess, the first city projects ever were on 3rd Street. And the Egloff Towers was just down the street from there. That was supposed to be an anchor on the Lower East Side to gentrify it, but it didn't take. And there were rumors that during the stock market crash of October 28, 1929, that Egloff was about to open up his building, and the market crashed and jumped off. But that's not a true story. That's not a true story. It's a rumor. But Egloff's building did not take off. They're trying to gentrify the Lower East Side.
I'm cutting across, John, sorry.
Sure. On many different occasions, but they succeeded later on, of course. This is inside the Crisadora house. This is Gary Parks, 24. We learned like woodworking there, all kinds of stuff after school facilities. But they had this great old-fashioned gymnasium. We played dodgeball. I loved it. It was a great time. This was around early 60s, 63, I think. CRO. This is Ludlow Street, is right over here. This gas station's right across the street. Townsdale Contestant would be over here. And there used to be a city park back there. Now you can't go in there, just it's all fenced off.
John, you're so popular, the crowd keeps growing.
Bring along. That's all right. That's all right. That's all right. You don't have to do that.
Now, did you have a light meter back then, or how did you get this?
I used to follow the data sheet on the film. I used to read every box of photographic film back then told you how to develop the film, how to expose it, how to wash it for permanence, and they followed it, and it was all accurate. Like I said, I never took a photo class, I just followed it to the letter. I followed every instruction that they gave me. At nighttime, I figured out that, from reading articles in Pop Photo, that the more you expose the film, it accumulated light. So when I went out with a tripod and the exposure wasn't enough, the next time I went back out, remember what I did the first time, gave it a few more seconds. And I got a denser negative. This is in one of the buildings that was going to be raised. I believe this is probably 88 East 1st Street. Crisadora House was 86, this is 88. And this is Peter Phineas, the guy you see smoking a cigarette. And this is Nevins, Peter Nevins. This is Gary Parks, who you saw with the pool cue. And this is George Acrofreda. Now, he died of dirty needles, his brother told me, in the 90s. He died of a heroin overdose, Peter, in 1971. I don't know what happened to the other ones. This guy we called Ginsburg. It seems like I don't know what his real name. We never knew what his real name was. But this picture appeared in the lowdown, and his youngest brother, George Acrofreda, contacted me by email. Nicholas Acrofreda. I didn't even know there was a Nicholas Acrofreda. I knew his other brother Michael, and I knew George, but I didn't know Nicholas. When I met Nicholas and he showed me a picture of himself as a child, I did remember his brother Michael bringing him to First Street as a tiny kid, because he was born in 1959. He was a little younger than me. I was born in 1947. So I would have been 12 years older than Nicholas. And I did talk to him, and he told me a lot of stuff about the family. Nicholas is still living in the same building that his grandparents lived in since 1940 at Spread Control. He's still there on Allen Street in Houston. He's in the same apartment. I would love to call this guy up and photograph him in that apartment and write a story about his, and then do a photo thing on this, because it's a really interesting story that he's still there. Caught in the act. We're hanging out in the candy store on 2nd Street. I had a flash on the camera, and she didn't like it. He doesn't care. Roman doesn't care. He's got cameras. She's the one who's annoyed. Some kid on 2nd Street I photographed. I don't know who he is. Yes, there's a couple of duplicates in here. Here we go. This is going up the staircase escalator at Delancey Street. I was playing on an escalator with a friend of mine, Hector, and the police was threatening to arrest us because we're running up and down as kids. But this is years later. This is 1969. This is on 2nd Street. And this is the Egloff Towers right here on 23rd Street. So this was an anchor for the gentrification of Lower East Side that never really took. They were trying to do it back then. Looks like something that came from Upper East Side. This is Pitt Street going this way. Oops. I'm going to close that one. This is Pitt Street that we're facing. My dad was driving. It was a rainy day back in November 1969. And that's Stanton Street going crosswise. Okay, this is the Crisadora house that was raised. And this guy's catching this frisbee, which is right here. It looks like a fun saucer. Mario saw me with my cameras and taking pictures, so he brought his little camera right here. This is Mario's younger brother. And this guy's family came from the south to live on the Lower East Side. They came from Alabama, I believe. His last name was Sidlow, and he wasn't too bright, so we called him Dodo. But I don't remember his first name. We just referred to him as Dodo. Okay, so the finder on this contacts was a little bizarre. That's why the camera's so shifted this way. But this is right in front of 80s First Street. This is Martin Rank I went to school with, Steve Benevento, Peter Phineas, Raymond this is Chryson. What was his first name? Forgot his first name. Mario Montieri. And they're getting into some kind of heated match here about something. You know, it's like a pissing contest among males to see who's the leader of the gang. So they're getting into an argument about something. And you can see back then how the heavy chrome fenders were on cars. Now there's some indication. I thought there was a manhole cover or something, and I think it still exists. This pole gives me an idea of where this picture is taken. So when I go back and I hold this picture up, I try to figure out exactly where this location was. They ripped up the street on First Street. It's been ripped up for years, and they still haven't fixed it. Mario with firecrackers. Oh, 10 cents. See, I always wondered if I lived near the mob, and then I went on the Lower East Side Historical Society had a mob type walk, and I found out I was living in the heart of it. I said, well, if I would, the crime families were all over the place. I was in the Sicilian zone with like 200,000 Sicilians in that area. And I'm named after my grandfather, John Milisenda, who came from Sicily on August 5th, 1905. I found out the Elizondo files when my grandfather arrived. And then 5 years later, he sent it for his wife. And he never saw his oldest daughter. His wife was pregnant when he left, so he met his daughter for the first time. She was about 4 years old or 5 years old when he met her. This is a, this is a walkway that leads down to there was 3 of these by each building. This is how we get to the backyard. You're free to go down there. This is a man who was stabbed. This is on Rivington Street, right off the corner of Pitt. This is a picture of my dad took in color, but it was so faded, my mother gave it to me. This is when my dad had a barber shop here. This is Robert Lum. This is Leonard Lum. And I met them both about 2 or 3 months before this picture was taken. And he and I became the best of friends taking pictures. This is Steve Benevento, my brother Dennis, my mom. This is Al Green, had a radio shop here and fixed radios, TVs. There's the Crisadora house before. The face of it was white. It had a brick face on it back then. And this is 1957 in June, and I was a Cub Scout. my nemesis, John Vanasco, and I used to get into fights, and he said, wait, I'm going to join the Cub Scouts, and I'm coming back to beat you up. So I followed him, and I learned out where the Cub Scout troop was, and I joined also. It was at Nativity Church on 2nd Avenue. Isabel Persante, she flirted with everybody wanted to date her. Steve Benevento talking to Gerard in the schoolyard. As I said before, the schoolyards before they were locked down. You had free access to them, unlike now because of insurance purposes and for the drug dealers and everything else. Steve Chryson, his name is Stephen, that's his name. That's right, his first name is Stephen. This is down on the corner right off of Avenue 8 is over here. And this is on First Street. They were doing this with a 2.25 negative, and I tell you, the quality with that camera was superlative because the negative is so much bigger than 35mm. The negative is gorgeous. So this is Yvonne, Mario, Peter with a cigar in his mouth. I don't know who she is. And this is another Sidlow, Joni Sidlow, Dodo's younger sister. But I don't know who that is. This picture appeared in an arts magazine when it was appearing in photo blogs. They loved it, and they published it in one of the inserts. Steve Benevento, his apartment. Is Mario, who always had a thing for Isabel, but she likes Steve better, so. Tough luck. Early flame. They almost were in a feud, these two, because he liked her and she would reject him. So this is the gas station right across the street, this, from First Street, and this is, Zero was sitting on the island over here, and this is during a rainstorm. I used to love to photograph in the weather. I always liked that. And I found out later on that my favorite photographer, Albert Stieglitz, liked to do the same thing. Let's go out into rain and snow and just photograph. This year I had a lot of chance, big chance to do that. Big chance. It just opened up my door. There it was.
How do you protect your rain?
Oh, I don't know. You just take it out, keep it under your coat, take it out, take a picture, put it back. To me, cameras can get wet because they're there to serve me. I don't get finicky with them. I just use them. But I never ruined a camera. Sometimes you can put a plastic bag around it, or I just keep it in my coat. Take it out when I want to take a picture. This is Steve's parents. This is at Henry's Delicatessen, which is now a big pizza shop on Houston Street. It's a couple of doors west from Katz Delicatessen. There were a lot more delis back then. There was the Crown Delicatessen right off of, right on the other side of Allen Street on Houston. There were like delicatessens all over the place. Schowski's, you could buy a lot of delicatessen stuff. Russ and Doyle's, you could buy all kinds of stuff there too. It was very big with the Jewish immigrants in the area. A lot of temples, there are a lot of Jewish temples and synagogues. Kids enjoying the sprays on the fire hydrant. George Alfredo and Mario were playing stickball, I guess, that day. That's why he's walking around with that. We'd find like mops, old mops and sticks, and in the backyard people would throw away and break off the end of it. We'd have a metal ring to hold the mop end and make a stickball out of it, a stickball bat. And then we would buy these pink balls for like 25 cents. We would chip in, and they were like the cores of tennis balls. They were the basis of a tennis ball. They call them Spaldings. That's what the backyard looked like. Now, I was standing in the renovated area of this now. It's like a little park. It was open. In modern times, in the same location where I took this picture, when I hold this picture up, I can approximate where this location is. You can see how I run down the backyard like with all the junk and everything. These buildings were designed so that in summer months, you could open up your window and it would be an updraft and it would cool off the apartments. And an unfortunate thing is they threw so much garbage back there, sometimes it would smell. So you didn't want to do that on a hot summer day. There's a derelict asking us for money on Christie Street, my friend Peter and I. That's Joni Sidlow, sitting in front of the Christopher house. Lumley moved down the block out of 80s First Street over here. This was his laundry, moved just down the street. I showed his great-grandchildren pictures of their great-grandparents that they never knew. I sent them emails with pictures of them. I had portraits of Lumley and his wife. This is First Street being raised in 1968. Now back then, again, they didn't block off these places. Kids could go in there and actually play. Everything was just open. I mean, everything was just, different world. His kids carrying on. 1968 into like 1969, they were raising us. There's a kid about to put dead into his face. That's Gary Park exploring circles and one of the hallways down the street on First Street. While Peter's looking around. This is the candy store, Vito's Candy Store. Vito Casada owned this, and he was a numbers taker for the mom. He also had this great candy store so he could show in the books that he earned some money. Because if he didn't, how would he be able to spend it? He had the most beautiful wives that he was divorced from. Father's Day, the three different women came up with their families, and they were all gorgeous women with children. They'd come up and see him, and he timed them out so they wouldn't run into each other. And they'd come and visit him, and the kids, I said, look at these beautiful, look at this guy married. Couldn't stay with that girl, but whatever. He's a very tough guy. He lost his finger, he claims, Japanese chopped it off during World War II, and he had a samurai sword over the wall, on the wall. Steve Benevento worked for him. And this is one of the entrances to the yard right here. This is Mario Marteri. This is Roman Feduniak. I don't know who these two ladies are. And these children I don't recognize. But it's like a vignette of the world. It's almost like now looking at this like a surreal picture because of the softness of the picture. It's like one is looking into a dream of something that once was, that no longer exists. Which makes this picture all the more important to me. Steve loaned Peter his bike and he bent up the wheels. So they're negotiating how they're going to fix it, how they're going to go about it. Negotiations are taking place here. This is the youngest Lum. This is Chuck Lumley's grandson. They didn't like the name John. They wanted to name him after me because my dad was such good friends with their family, now such good friends with his grandchildren. So they called him Johnson. Johnson Lum. I was invited, when he was born, I was invited to a big banquet, Chinese banquet as a kid. There's Leonard Lum. This is my dark room on 3rd Street, a couple of doors down from where the Hells Angels are. Or now, I'm still there. My uncle was landlord to the, was agent to the landlord, so I got this at a really good price. I think in 1968 I was paying $35 a month for the stock room. And I recently walked by it, so it was like I was with a friend and the door was open, so it was back there. There I am, 1966, doing a self-portrait. These are 2 pictures of my brother Dennis on the bottom. And there I am in 1963.
You look like Ginsberg.
And my driver's license, it looks like Gorbachev. So come to me a hearing, I look like that. This is an interesting picture because this is like a very early beginning with the Contax 2A, 1965, and it's the beginning of photographing my parents. And I'm now editing and putting a show together of pictures from the 1970s that have never been shown before. And I have 50 years of pictures of my mother, father, and brother. My brother's developmentally disabled, and I think he's the prime reason why I started photographing now. And this document exists in the Museum of Modern Art, it's in the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris, it's in a lot of collections and private collections. And if you're interested in seeing a small cross-section of these images, it will be at the Metropolitan Playhouse, and I have a sign-up sheet over there. Put your name and your email address, and I will let you know when that's happening so I can invite you to the opening and you can see those pictures, and I'm going to have a talk about those pictures as well. Those pictures are going to be, I put them into a play. I turned them into a play. Ava over here is an actress who invited me to join her with her acting coach. I've been around her and her acting coach. I learned a lot about acting. And the Metropolitan Playhouse with Alex, I've been hanging out there. So I've been around actors, acting coaches, directors. So I started to think about making these pictures into a play. And I've introduced a very mild form of a death and resurrection within the pictures, within 15 images. So it's a little play that I put together. It took me a week to edit this. But I printed half the pictures, and then I'll print the other half tomorrow, and then I'm going to make mats and cut them out and frame them. So by sometime in April, the pictures will be hung at the Metropolitan Playhouse. And then the opening will probably be during Lower East Side History Month, so I haven't discussed that with Alex yet. So I'm thinking around sometime in May, we'll have an opening. But this is what I look like in coming out of high school. I used to have the camera inside this beat-up binocular bag, card case. The leather strap's worn off, so I put a string around it. I get my camera, then I buy a roll of film. And there I am in 1969. And my dark room was on the other side of the staircase. Arthur Freed had a dark room here. He taught at Pratt Institute. And it's Arthur Freed that got me the job as a technician at Pratt. And I left the Lower East Side. My life took a right-hand turn knowing him, because he introduced me to a whole different world. And I left the Lower East Side at that point, in a sense, and the people that I knew. actually went to Pratt and I got a degree in photography. So this was his darkroom here, office, and my darkroom was on the other side of the staircase. He's recently retired from teaching. A really fantastic teacher. My dad with a cigarette. This is on 2nd Avenue. She's throwing out water while the water's being splashed. This is from First Street, 1964. This is Isabel. This is Lorraine Vanasco. And this is Lynn, Steve's cousin. She died of a brain tumor, poor thing, as a teenager. This is in front of Vito's Candy Store, circa 1964. This is Lorraine Vanasco. Mario standing by holding Steve's coat while he's trying to open up this package that came from the Chinese hand worker. Unravel it. Steve going back to the Navy, 1969. His parents now live in the Fiorello LaGuardia projects at this point. And he's heading back during the Vietnam War. And this is what the First Street book looks like on the cover. This is what the Lower East Side book looks like on the cover. That's the Kodak Pony camera that I had. This is another camera, and I found this on the web, so I decided to show it. This is what the Contax 2A looked like from the 50s. These cameras were handmade. Every part in there was hand-honed. I just read on the website. They weren't mass-produced at all. The designer or the engineer would even tap in his signature or his initials someplace on the parts.
You still have them?
I wish I did. I wish I did. I got rid of them. It would be great. And this is the Leica M3. Mine was a double stroke, so mine was like from the early 50s. But you know, my photography took a real turn when I started to use these cameras. You know, from the Contax on up. And this is what a mellow roll looked like, and this is what Vito used to sell in the summertime. So I found a mellow roll, I brought it in. Showed you. This is what firecrackers look like. Roller skates that are made for scooters. What they do is they would take the rubber out of the front wheel. It had a cushion rubber so it would pivot and you could turn the scooter. And they would nail in the front end and the back end into a 2x4 shaft with a milk crate on it. So this is what it would look like. I found this on the web. You can see this someplace in the Lower East Side. This took place in the 50s. Sloan's, anything on wheels. So there's Steve, what he looked like in 1965, and this is what he looked like in 2011. We were on the High Line, he came for a visit from California. And he's holding a digital camera, by the way. So that's it.
I like to take pictures of the